Okay, so we're in the middle of 126, Kuf Chaf Vav, and again, let's just, in the beginning of 126, he writes, in 125, the Neshama says, Adheina dibarna min hara b'chlal, and until this point we spoke of evil in its general sense, Tzorich lefarid yoser inyan, l'das dracha b'frat. Now we need to drill down into more details to know its ways in particulars, okay? So then the Seichel says that the essence of Ra can be divided into two categories. Okay, one is Shiflus Upchisus, which is a sort of degradation, right? Degradation. And the other one is Hefsed, which is a defect. So degradation and defect, right? So a Ra is kind of is a lower level. But besides being on a lower level, it could also be internally defected, right, or rotten, or spoiled, right, right, messed up, mutated. Okay, so now he says first we're going to only talk about this first type of Ra, which is the degradation, the degradation. Okay, and he basically again reminding us, also just remembering that he spoke about the world as this clock, right? Where there are these what he calls canoniers, where these gears, right? And a human being is attached to all the gears, right? So that even the slightest thing that the human being does has effect on the gears. Then he also told us that, but that doesn't mean that every person has equal impact, right, on the gears, right? Some people are more local, and their gear. Everybody has effect on the gears, but some people are more local, and therefore their effect is more local. While other people's are greater, like Yonas and Ben Uziel is much greater. So when he does something, it has much stronger effect. Furthermore, he said that also different times, different places, right? In Beis Hamikdash, it's one type of an effect. On Shabbos, Yom Tov is another one type of an effect. On regular day, a different type of an effect. So there are different impacts, right? Depending on different levels, different people, etc. Okay, so again, so we're talking about degradation. So he says, so technically then he says a question. Technically, everything is degraded to some degree. Meaning besides, once you're not God, that means you're automatically on a lower level, right? So even malachim, right, even angels are going to be on a lower level. They're going to be a level lower than divine. So automatically, that's what he's trying to explain, how to incorporate degradation that's evil and degradation that's, I guess, let's call it natural. Natural. So, good. So fine. So again, so what was the point of telling us that all of these, that different people impact the world in different ways and at different times? What he wants to say is that every, how should I say it? Every feature, and I think he's going to bring this out now, but every feature of a human being, right, is not accidental. Even if it seems like accidental, it's not accidental. And so a person's design already precludes kind of his impact on the world, right? Meaning
general design,
no, even specific. Meaning everything is b'cheshbon, basically. Even so, we understand that there's sometimes we understand there's intrinsic elements, and then there are, what would be the opposite of intrinsic? Accidental. It's called accidental elements, right? But he's basically going to tell us that even the accidentals are intrinsic. Basically, everything is nothing's accidental, right? Everything has its particular reason. Okay, in other words, the physical appearance of a person, his built-in personality, even his hair color, eye color, everything has a purpose, and everything is going to have some kind of meaning why this person was like this, and okay. Yeah. So again, so that's what we're talking about again, degradation, because it's everything is going to be precision. Okay, so now that's where we're going to start. So then he told us also that obviously there's a difference between Adam Arishon before the sin, there's Adam Arishon after the sin, and there's Adam, the human race, in the future, which is what the same thing that Adam Arishon could have been had he not sinned, right? So in other words, there's Adam Rishon the way he was, there was the Adam when he fell, and then there's the Adam in the potential that he could have been. Okay? So that's where we are. So the last, this is the last really line that we read from the previous paragraph. It says, Etzem, that, right, he says that the nature of all the elements will depend also on what the being is. And then generally it says, Etzem mahus hanoisiyim. Okay, that's the last of the previous paragraph. Etzem mahus hanoisiyim, the essence of noisim, of items, of objects, umikrehem, and also their accidentals, right? B'chol inyonehem, in all different aspects, misyachesim heim tomid, they are always interconnected. Okay, so in other words, the essentials and the accidentals, they're always non-accidental. They're always connected. They're always related. Okay? V'nimtza, so now let's continue with that. V'nimtza, sheshtei havchonos yesh lanu l'avchen be'inyan ha'odam. B'chol shar habriyos. And really, we have to identify, we have to discriminate, differentiate between two ideas or two concepts when it comes to mankind and all other beings. Aleph, the first one, mitzius ha'inyonim hamechuvonim b'mitziyusom u'b'mikreihem. The essence of elements that are intended in their essence and in their accidentals. What does that mean? That means, again, Pirush, as he explains, hatoilodos hanolos mehaviyosam and pulasehem. That's the results, right? The outcomes that come about through their actions, right? In other words, why did he say it like that in a funny way? Because when a person's created, he's, so to speak, a bundle of potential impact, right? So in other words, not only in a person, when any being is created, he's not. What does it mean that? What does that mean? That being means he's the potential to do all sorts of things, right? So if you want to understand that being, you have to understand the potential impact that being has, right? That's what it says, meaning his intended connection, or his intended strings, but his intended connection in the world, right? That's the first thing, right? That's the tolodus, right? So in other words, every being is a potential of activity. So if you want to understand the being, right, you have to understand again. I want to clarify, because he said that the essence and the accidentals are all interconnected. So in other words, all of our aspects and all of our impacts are really part of our essence, right? So to fully understand the essence of a being, you also have to understand all of these other elements of the being too. Okay. So that's the Aleph. Va'beis, the second thing, haderech shelahem, and also their ways. What does it mean, their ways? Again, Pirush, tzurasom v'tzuras pe'ulosehem, their form and the form of their actions. Again, in other words, I think what he means over here is that there will be basically different forms, spiritual forms, physical forms, right? In other words, they're different natures of existences. So if you want to understand a certain being, you have to understand what kind of a being it is. Is it let's say a sea creature? Then it'll have its one type of a nature. If it's an air creature, it's another type of. If it's a malach, it's a different type of a creature. But basically, that's a derech. That's what he means by derech shalahem. Ki ma sheyaniya haguf yuchal yaniya gam haneshama v'amalach. What the body, I'm not sure exactly what it means, but what the body can move, also the neshama and the angel can move. In other words, can affect. Ach zelefi darko v'zelefi darko. But however, each one in its own way. Okay? Right? So what each, right? In other words, so if you want to understand the beings, you have to understand again their impact. Okay, and also kind of the way that they're designed to accomplish that impact, right? Okay, let's continue. Okay, and behold, these are two midos. These are two midos. Okay, right? Again, I'm not sure why he calls them midos, but they are very, big actions of Hashem's actions. Okay, meaning, let's see, Aleph, Kviyus Masha Yoilid Mipu'ulois Hanivroim, right, that he designed what will be the result of actions of creations, right, now, meaning now, I guess he's looking from the perspective of the designer. Before he was looking from the perspective of the creations. If you want to understand the creations, you have to understand their impact. Now he's looking from the perspective of the designer. He says that Hashem intentionally designed that these creations should have such impact. Okay? So, Aleph, Kuyus Mashiyolim Mipu'ulois Hanivroim, Vezeklal Kol Chukois Han Hagosoi, and as a result, that also kind of defines what Hashem's interactions with the world are going to be, right? Because he's on the other side of that ping pong table, right? So if they're having impact on the Bria, which is running, so now he's going to be intervening accordingly. Again, and how he organized all of these gears. And the second midah, so one midah is him working the gears and interacting with all these impacts that he designed for the creations. And the second is the way he said in a clear I guess the mechanism by which these beings are going to make these outcomes, these results. And again, even for that, there's many different layers and organizations. Okay, I'm not fully understanding what's happening here, but let's keep going. So what comes out is in the beginning, before the sin of man, so man was at a very high level. Rishoina, originally, be'ikar mitziusoi, in the essence of his creation. Pirush, again, what does that mean? It means toildois masov, in his ability to impact. Shehoyu magiyim l'ru ha'olam. They were able to reach the very height of the world. As we written before. Right? So originally, Odom Arishon was on a higher level. As a result of being on a higher level, his impact was also significantly greater. Like he said before, again, that people on a higher level have greater impact, like Yonasan ben Uziel. So therefore, Odom Arishon, before the Chet, was on a higher level, and so therefore every action that he did, shook up the entire creation. V'ashenis, secondly, he was different, b'tzuroso, in his form. Ubetzuras ma'asov, and in the form of his actions, betavnis gufay mamash, in his actual makeup, physical makeup. Kikvar hoyazoich gufoy k'metzius hamalachim mamash, because his body was so pure like the purity of angels themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Again, let's think this through together, because this is not maybe as simple as it sounds. Meaning, what he's saying is that the original physical makeup of Adam Arishon was as spiritual as an angel.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
Yeah,
Which is
very far
difficult
from
to
what was
understand, because what makes him physical then?
then. Not an
But let's keep reading. He's going to keep coming to this point. He was so spiritual that the place that was appropriate for his dwelling was Gan Eden. Again, also, Gan Eden, is it a spiritual place or a physical place? He understands that technically it's a physical place, but that type of physicality is, as you know, it's going to speak us out clearly, is what we would consider now spirituality. Shehu gam achshav moder lemalachim haruchos, and he says right now it's still currently is a dwelling place of angels and spirits. Okay, so Gan Eden, according to him, is a spiritual place where angels currently can reside. So that was the original earth that Adam, Ofer men Adama, who was earth dust from the ground, that's where he lived, right? That was his place. In other words, that was his physical place, that he was put there to work the ground, right, and protect and eat the trees and right, whatever, not eat from the trees. But the bottom line is, according to Ramchal's understanding, that Gan Eden was a spiritual place, but that was Adam's physical. For Adam, that was his physical place. Okay, in other words, his spiritual was even greater, possibly, than that. I guess. I mean, let's keep going.
Okay.
Balzer Romzu Razal, and for that our rabbis hinted. But Omram, when they said, "But Torah Rabbi Meir," that in the Torah, in the Sefer Torah of Rabbi Meir, Motzu Kosov, they found it was written Kosnois Oir, right? When the pasuk says that Hashem made, right, these leather garments, right? We say leather garments, Kosnois Or. Right, from the same language as Soinus Pasim, right? This shirts of oir with an ayin is leather, but in Rabbi Meir's Torah it was written Kosnais oir with an aleph, right? That they were garments of light. That Hashem, right, dressed them with garments of light. So in other words, so what does that mean? Again, so right now Ramchal is going to just interpret this statement of whatever the Gemara means, but he says the general gist of that statement is, now this particular chazal has been explained greatly by our sages, but the general gist is, in this statement, l'haidia, to tell us how pure was the body of the first man before his sin. That after the sin, that after he became thick and gas, and another word for thick, and the kovid and heavy kayom hazeh. Again, so I'm not sure exactly how Ramchal visualizes it, but it sounds like he understands that there's sort of progression of elements, I guess, and the lighter the element, the less physical it is. So maybe Adam Arishon resided in some sort of a, I don't know, helium type of a universe where everything is made of noble gases. I don't know. Okay. And he says, in the truth is, we see such an example in our world, Chanoich ve'Eliyahu, and these are characters like Chanoich and Eliyahu, shegufom mamesh nizdakach v'nisala, that their very body was purified and elevated liyos k'malachim alyonim, to be on the level of lofty angels. In other words, so it's theoretically possible that this physical body can be transformed into some kind of other
consistency.
Yes, some kind of other matter, right? that this matter can then become angel-like. In other words, you become this maybe ghost that could just like appear and disappear, and I don't know exactly what again. Upshitahu shigam hisnoyoi upuloisu hoyu b'derech yoser dak. So it's understandable if he was different, or the Mauritian was different, so then his actions were also in ways that were yoser dak, were more light, v'ruchni, and more spiritual vade. Kepu'ulois chanoich v'liyahu hayom hazeh. Again, like the actions of Chanoich and Eliyahu today. Okay? Again, today, does it mean like today, like right now? Or does it mean like when they were, meaning when they were around? I'm not sure. Well, but they're still around, you're saying. It doesn't make a difference.
Well, no, in the physical original form.
Right, I guess so. Right, so what is he saying? Again, I'm not sure what he's saying. Again, I'm not sure what body does Eliyahu Hanavi have today.
But whatever is, I guess.
Like a ghost, a spirit. A spirit, is that's what we mean? Like what exactly?
I don't think so. I guess whatever Zara we used to do it to this.
Meaning we don't understand. Okay, the Tiri, so and see, Ki Gan Eden mashehoyash hushiyeh, and Gan Eden, what is that will be? Okay, so meaning he seems to be saying that the Gan Eden of yesterday is the same Gan Eden that will be in the future.
Okay.
Right, so not like I said before, that the Gan Eden, was like he's only a dwelling for his physical self.
Yeah.
Meaning it's somehow Gan Eden is a spiritual dwelling for both Adam's physical self and his spiritual self. Again, right now, is this world a dwelling for our physical self and our spiritual self? In some ways yes, but on the other hand, we don't have any relationship or any connection to our spiritual self. At least as maybe some other people are. I don't know. Okay, so v'tirek Gan Eden mashu Yehushia Gan Eden, what was that? Is that what that will be? Vadei mokum dak v'ruchni. Certainly, it's a place that's very thin and spiritual. Sheshom choinois haruchois gamat, because that's where spirits can still reside. Va'Torah he'ida al odom shehoyashom. And the Torah testified upon Adam that was there. The Torah says that he was eating and deriving benefit from fruits that were growing there. Now that we understand that even that today this place is able to house neshamis. Again, before he said ruchos, now he says neshamis again. I'm not sure if that's significant or not. So clearly that the fruits that were there, that the Torah describes that they were eating fruits or whatever, right? They clearly were not same physical fruits that we understand. That they are just like, the fruits of this world. However, they were much more rarefied and much thinner. So now listen to this line. At least if you want to imagine it, it's like comparing air to dirt. Okay, again, it seems like that's how he visualizes spirituality. That it becomes more quote unquote ethereal, right? It's becoming less tangible. So I guess the closest that we can understand what does it mean to become less tangible is by, today we understand better. We have, what are they called? Holograms, right? So a hologram, potentially, right?
Show you like a person.
But a hologram cannot pick up my coffee cup, right? It will just so I'm not sure if a hologram can interact with our world. I don't know. Okay. But moving on, again, I'm not sure what he means. But the point is that he's saying is that clearly the Gan Eden, since we know that Gan Eden is the place for, right, it's basically a mathematical equation. Since we know that Gan Eden is a place for spiritual beings now, must be that the Gan Eden then was also spiritual, Therefore, the fruits, since the Torah, even though the Torah describes it in very this world type of ways, it means significantly more spiritual. Okay.
Okay, but how he uses animals? Fruits I can understand. There's a room for wiggling.
Right.
But what about animals?
Right. Animals must be also of some different kind. Yeah. 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 Again, maybe that's why they were not chishni. You know what I mean? Like there was nothing. There was no.
Oh, they were not eating each other.
Right.
But nevertheless, and I was able to see nature each one, name each one.
Right.
Mm.
Yeah. Okay. I don't know. And the eating that was there is not like the eating of the body now. He was also consuming a body that was thin and almost spiritual. Again, like the body of Eliyahu and Chanoich. However, this is what I spoke of. This is the thing that I mentioned. So that again, according to the nature of the results, that need to come out from our actions. So too are the ways that these actions need to be performed. We'll see in a second what he means. And all of the elements of the bria, or all of the items of the bria, are mesyachasim, are interrelated. And they equalize all items with their conditions. Hamaisim, actions, Hatoldos, the results, Hamokum, the place, Vapoil, and the actor, Oisom, the one who, the one who Zebor, and that's clear. Okay, so again, how does again? I'm just curious how they translate by you this line. Let me just see what he says over here. So he says over here, right? And the eating of them too was not by a body coarse and gross, as at present, but by a rarefied, almost spiritual body like that of Eliyahu and Chanoich, as we explained. It is, as we have said, that in accordance with the nature of the results to be achieved through the deeds, so are the ways in which the deeds are executed.
The quality and form of our actions reflect the importance of what these actions are supposed to achieve.
Again, sorry.
The quality and the form of our actions reflect the importance of what these actions are supposed to achieve. Is that am I in the right place?
Yeah, I think so. I don't know why they use the words importance, right? But he's saying the quality of the actions, the nature of the actions has to reflect the outcomes of those actions. The nature of the actions has to reflect the outcomes of those actions. The nature of the actions reflects, again, this is what it says, that in accordance with the nature of the results to be achieved through the deeds, so are the ways in which the deeds are executed. And there is an exact correspondence between the nature and the conditions of all creations in terms of deeds, result, locale, and doer, and this is clear.
The possible outcome includes in itself all the possibles of ways of getting there.
Okay, I mean, I don't know why he says it in such a fancy way. It's seemingly what he's saying is that if the results are going to be, maybe that's why they use the words importance now that I think about it, okay, that if the results are going to be far-reaching, right, so then you have to give the entity that's going to produce those results the elements to be able to reach those far-reaching levels. So therefore, if the Adam Arishan is able to reach higher levels of creation, then he himself has to be on a higher level. That's basically what he's saying. Okay. Again, does it have to be so? He's saying it does. That's what he's saying. He said it has to be so. It has to be, but I don't fully understand, because at the end of the day, there's a domino effect, right? And as far as the dominoes fall, so let them keep falling, right?
Yeah.
Let them. God can design how, you know what I mean? Like,
I was kind of getting deep on this.
what do you?
Let's say, person doing action like he's doing mitzvah, spiritual action,
Right,
far-reaching effect.
right,
Person
for sure.
Person sleeping, it's a physical activity.
Right.
And obviously meant for something, but effect but less causing.
Okay.
Spiritual is further reaching, sleeping, physical, obviously for something but less reaching. That's how
Okay.
it says.
Right, but what he's saying is, that was, to me, that's true, but that was like a mashal to say that just like we understand now that a spiritual activity has far-reaching consequences more than the physical activity, so too a being, right, like a Yonas ben Uziel, has a far-reaching consequences, and therefore Adam Arishan, who is even higher, will have even far-reaching consequences. So the point is that the higher spiritual level you are, the farther-reaching consequences you're going to have. And therefore, if you want to reach all those higher levels, you have to have the actor, right? Right. That's what he says in the end. That the actor, the place, right, the actions and the results, they're all mirror each other.
Yeah.
So therefore, if the results are going to be very high level spiritual, so then the actor has to be also high level spiritual, and the place where he's acting also has to be high level spiritual. So therefore, Adam Arishan before the Chet and Gan Eden had to be designed in a very, very spiritual way. That's what he's saying.
Because he has a potential.
Right. Okay. So fine. So keep going. Let's see. V'tiri, and now see, ki kagufnius shel odem arishin koidem cheto hoyo ke'erech aruchnius asher loy ato. And see that the physicality of Adam Arishan before the sin was on the level of the spirituality which Adam has now, right? So our spirituality is Adam Arishan's physicality. Okay. Again, why is he telling? Let's just prerequisite. Why is he telling us this? Because remember, why are we here in the first place? He's trying to explain to us the nature of evil, which is a type of evil called degradation. Right. So now he finally is getting to his point that basically that we on the level of Adam Arishan, we are now an evil degradation, right, of what Adam Arishan was. The physicality of Adam Arishan before the sin, which was on the level of ruchnius, which we have now. Go see what kind of spirituality he had, and how far-reaching his results were. And then it's enough to say that what our sages say in the statement that we mentioned above, that the ministering angels were about to tell him that he's basically, they equated him to God. So how did they make such a mistake? Clearly, that's how far-reaching Adam Arishan's spirituality was. That as close to godliness, as divine as you could possibly imagine. And from there you'll understand. Now you understand how much greater he could have been had he not sinned. Right? If even before the sin he was almost divine. Right? Because they wouldn't have then become even higher on the level that it was prepared for him. Just like we see today, that the physicality of then, is like the spirituality that is now. Then we understand that if his physicality of had he become elevated, then his physicality then would have become like his spirituality then, right? Had he not sinned and become elevated, then his physicality of then would have been transformed into the spirituality of then, right?
Yeah.
And then his spirituality would have been something altogether. Because that's the nature of progression, that things get elevated, from a level to a level. Okay? So, let's see how far we can get. Kind of getting late. There's a light at the end of the tunnel, but let's see. V'amnam kol ze inyan shnei ha'etzim. And this is a general idea of the two trees, Eitz HaChaim ve'Eitz HaDaas, right? The tree of life and the tree of knowledge. Certainly, the pasuk is not, does not leave its simple meaning. Of course, the wood was wood, right? The trees were trees. Peris, and the fruits were fruits. And the eating was eating. Ach peres dakim ve'achila daka. However, peres were very thin, right, ethereal. Ve'achila daka, and the eating was very ethereal. It's not something that our mind can really formulate in our head. Because our mind can only conceptualize physical things. However, we do understand that even in our physical fruits, right? Physical fruits, yesh segulos, there are certain qualities that are helpful, for example, for healing, and other things, right? Or in other words, I don't know what he means by other things, but you can take some, I don't know, maybe you can smoke some weed and it'll get you high. I don't know, meaning it has impact. And there are within the natural things, wondrous actions. So therefore, in these trees, there was a segula, in other words, there was a quality, kind of ingredients that Hashem designed in them. The Eitz HaChaim had the ability that when you ingest its fruit, it gives you knowledge, proper knowledge, and connection to Hashem, and to love for Hashem, and knowledge of His holy ways. Okay, so how many things is that? How many things did the Eitz HaChaim accomplish? Knowledge, proper knowledge, connection, love, and again, knowledge of His ways. I don't know what the difference between knowledge and knowledge. And it would also remove from the soul different types. The Eitz HaDaas was the opposite. Through its fruits, it would go into the heart of a person, these physical desires, right? And all other sinful things. If Adam Rishon would have eaten from Eitz HaChaim and not from Eitz HaDaas, he would then continue to cling to the holiness of his Creator. And then he would bask in his brilliance, I guess, in holy brilliance forever and ever without separation. And when he eats from the Eitz HaDaas, then he was plunged into these physical desires, and the love of physicality. So mida keneged mida, since he plunged himself towards kind of physical things, then mida keneged mida, he lost his highest levels of his ruchnius. right? He was no longer able to impact the world into those higher level things, like we said before, because once you can only impact those higher level things if you're on the level of those higher level things. Now that he's no longer on that level, so then he doesn't have that impact anymore. And he remained physical for the rest of the days that was decreed for him. Now he means not only means Odom Harishon, I think he means all of humanity now. Until he's satisfied, he satiates from the fruit of his sin, and then he will be healed. Haklal hagodol, and then so we have a general principle. Kivan shuloko harehu ke'achicha. This is a statement from Gemara Makos. Gemara Makos says the pasuk says by when a person gets makos, it says v'nikle achicha le'einecha, and your brother will be hit, or will be really will be embarrassed before you, so to speak. So why is he called him your brother? It was just before that it was called the Rasha, right? The Rasha will get hit. So Gemara says we see from here that once punishment is administered, he's once again becomes your brother. In other words, he is restored to his original level, right? So in other words, as soon as you go through the prescribed punishment, then you get back to that achicha level. So then he comes back to his original status. And then also his being, his existence then is perfected with what never happened originally. That originally never happened. Right. Okay. What time is it? We have 2 more paragraphs, so to speak. Should we run for it? Let's see. Let's just see, and then we'll just maybe do one. V'hine kol zehu achelik shel hara, harishon shel hara. Now, all of this that I'm describing to you, says, is all within this first type of evil, right? Because again, now he's explaining to us, right, how Odom Harishon basically began the process of this degradation, right? So therefore, the evil, that one level of evil that exists is the physicality below its original physicality, and every person is constantly, so to speak. And this is how Rav Dessler explains also that, right, our Bechira is constantly, being upgraded or downgraded, right? So when a person starts out, let's say keeping mitzvahs, so his Bechira is in love, should I keep Shabbos, should I not keep Shabbos? When he gets a little older and he's used to keeping Shabbos, so maybe then that's no longer his Bechira level, right? His Bechira level is, I don't know, should I wake up for minyan, should I not wake up for minyan, right? So at every growth level, people's Bechira changes. Right, so he's saying a little differently. He's saying that as people progress, they're becoming more mature or less mature. Before their interests were physical, and they were, as they grow up and they realize, okay, that doesn't interest me anymore. Now I'm more interested by these more spiritual things, right? So that's what he's saying. He's saying that one type of ra that exists is being below the level that you are, you should be on. Fine. V'asheni who have seidim ha'ashchasa. The second level is actually a mutation, a defect, some kind of a degeneration within the level. As we explained, v'teidi. Now he says a very important thing. She'ein have seidim neiflim ela betzura hashpola hazois hachomriyes. That these genetic defects, and genetic, I mean, the defects, not only the degradation but actual internal problems, they only exist within this lower physical level. Meaning, once something is below the level, then it's open itself to these additional problems of mutations, right? If you're on a higher level, then you don't have that problem. Okay. But any form that's above this, you don't have that problem. When Odom Harishon himself was on a higher level, there was no, for example, sickness or any damage because he's on a higher level. All of this was designed from the beginning. ובבריאס הרע עצמאי נעשה כל אלה בחוק הטבע הכללי. And with, now, this is interesting, but this is not sure exactly what he means. ובבריאס הרע עצמאי, now with the creation of evil itself, נעשה כל אלה בחוק הטבע הכללי. All of these were done to the general nature of the world. So I'm not sure what he means over here. Meaning, is he talking about the creation of the Ra as was created by actions of Adam Arishan, or the ones that was initially built into the? Meaning, what was the Ra that before? Meaning, there was a Ra that existed before Adam Arishan sinned, right? So what was the nature of the Ra?
It was a principle, as you spoke before. It was an idea, it was a concept.
Right, the possibility
It
of
was a
going
concept.
that way.
Right. Okay. So over here, what Ra is he talking about over here in this sentence? Is he talking about the original creation of the potential for Ra, or the Ra itself that was created, potentiated now by the action of Adam Arishan?
No, I think potential was created when the world was created. Everything was created back then. So potential idea was created back then. Now it just became.
Right, but what is he referring to now?
Right.
Right.
Let's see. Let's read it again. With the creation of evil itself, nasa kol eila, all of these things were made b'choik hateva haklali, in the nature of the general nature of things. It sounds like all of this was already pre-designed, meaning in the original creation of Ra, all of the system was already put in place.
Yeah, but they were made by Adam's action. That's
Put into place, right?
That's what he's saying.
Right.
So God himself, he cannot create bad. He just his creations screwed up stuff, and that's how it happened.
Right.
So that's what happens here.
Okay. Even though you already heard that Adam had a lowering from the moment that he was created. Again, in the, I'm not sure what he means.
That? Because he was created physical? Meaning as soon as you deviate from the spiritual, that's the automatic lowering? Is that what you're referring to? Or he started falling as soon as he got created?
I'm not sure.
Would that read?
Any clarity on your
Have a commentary now. Furthermore, we have already learned that Adam was lowered at the time of his creation. Therefore, the potential for degradation and destruction certainly existed in him already. Not only, here's the commentary. Not only did the spiritual source of the second level of evil already exist before the sin, but it was also inherent in Adam's state of relative debasement in Gan Eden. Since he existed at a level below the one fit for him, he was liable to sin and bring the destruction for himself. He existed at a level below the one fit for him.
Yeah, because that's what I'm saying. His potential to become more.
Right, but this is before he already existed on a lower level.
Yeah. It's like us, it's saying like the reason was that evil is here, so it's give you opportunity to grow. So he had to give also opportunity something. Because he was created with a higher potential. In order to create higher potential, you have to be below it a little bit. So he was brought down.
There's a room to grow.
Yeah, so that's why he was.
That's an idea.
Okay. So I'm sorry, I missed what you said. What did you say?
No, that's pretty much.
He was created specifically with room to grow.
Right. So we know, right? So in the beginning, right, he says from the very beginning that anything that's not divine is technically already on a lower level.
Yeah.
So, and over here it's even more so because he had created lower in order, like you said, in order to be able to then move up.
Yeah.
So therefore, even though that lowering was not in itself inherently problematic because it was designed on purpose that way. But at the same time, it's still a lowering, so that there is something kind of, it's a lowering that the energy of kind of lowering is already in existence, and there's something that's pulling you down. Since there's a potential to both to go up and to go down, so he's equally kind of drawn to both ways. So in other words, so how does that again? How does it bring the second? So how does that bring the second type of evil? So where's the degeneration? Where's the mutation? So he says only in potential. So the potential, he's saying the potential for the second evil was already. Again, what he's trying to appreciate right now is trying to tell us is that, again, since he's telling us that the second type of evil, which is the genetic, let's call it whatever you call it, genetic mutation, right, only exists on a lower level of physicality, right? But at the same time, he tells us that all of this was already put in place from the very beginning of creation. So where in this system that was put in place is the potential for that degeneration? Degradation we understand, but where's the root of degeneration, right? And he's saying since it was already built into Adam Rishon to be on a lower level to some degree, so then that already allowed the potential for the second type of evil also to exist. It didn't exist in reality yet, but the potential for it was already in its place. So once he actually brought that lower level into existence, then the second type of level kicked in. Okay, and we have to.
It kind of makes sense because everything had to be created with the potential for.
But this is a war. Meaning this is a much worse type of evil. The second type of evil is like real evil. What we understand is the cruelty, this. I mean, that's like, that creates death, destruction, sickness, all of these other things. Right? That where does it come from? Right? Where does it come from? And he said because it had to be there in the beginning of the creation, but yet it wasn't there. So it's like a tricky. He's accomplishing a very tricky task. He's saying that it was there in potential, but it wasn't there in reality.
Just
it's a little tricky.
Stepping down to the lower level.
Right. Okay. To be continued.